Good evening, everybody. My name is Cynthia Furlong Reynolds. I'm the Vice President of the Chelsea Area Historical Society, and on behalf of all of us, we'd like to welcome you all warmly tonight. We're so grateful you're here. 11 years ago, when I began researching Chelsea history for my book, Our Hometown, the Historical Society consisted solely of two very dedicated and hardworking women who shared a dream, Kathy Clark and Marge Hepburn. The Historical Society's collection of artifacts, manuscripts, and materials could often be found in boxes under Kathy's bed at her Kavanaugh Lake home. But as time went on, I saw the women's dream take root. For some years, the depot offered display space for historical collections, and visitors began appearing increasingly frequently on Saturdays to play with an elaborate train set, study the antique clothing and memorabilia displayed in display cases and on mannequins, and to ask questions about their family, about Chelsea history, and about what we were doing and why we were there. When our collection outgrew that space, the Historical Society boxed up its artifacts and manuscripts and researched its options. In 2006, the Gourmet Chocolate Shop on North Main Street offered display and storage space, bringing new life to our Historical Society. Our membership began growing, our monthly meetings featured educational and informative programs, and we began digitizing manuscripts and photographs, and our outreach began in earnest. In 2010, thanks to the generosity of Linda Collins, we were able to lease the Archie Wilkinson House, where our collections have expanded significantly. In the past 18 months, with Janet Oglematter as our president, we've accomplished amazing things. We've doubled our collection of antiques and artifacts and photographs. We've worked with local educators to incorporate Chelsea history into our school curricula. We've completed a tour of the cemetery and a booklet for visitors. We've created a walking tour, and Janet is now launching another book project. We produced the 175th anniversary commemorative book. We maintain regular weekly museum hours now. We've coordinated research and interview projects with the McCune Memorial Library. We adopted the Monitors, a history-minded baseball team, and we began establishing a regional reputation. Thanks to the generosity of Howdy Homes, we mounted a display of Jiffy artifacts at the Washtenaw Historical Society last summer. This year we have a brand new president who promises fun outings and fun things too. We face our greatest challenge right now to date. We're searching for permanent quarters for our collections. We have a limited amount of time at our current location. And once again, our members share an ambitious dream for our future. History is really a collection of stories about a special place and the people who belong and belonged there, the way they lived, the way they worked and socialized and faced obstacles and succeeded in surmounting those obstacles. Our president, George Till, will introduce a special speaker tonight who knows the value and the magic of stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, if everyone takes a look at the program on your tables, we're not even going to look at that. We know that Bob Riemenschneider is a fourth generation Riemenschneider. We also know that Bob Riemenschneider has an illustrious past history, a great member of the fabric of our community. And I don't want to talk about that either. What I want to talk about is Bob Riemenschneider, the person. And so I'm going to tell you a little story. Back in the day, which is probably back in the early 70s, my wife and I were searching for a home out here. We lived in Ann Arbor at the time. Back in those days, which I guess they weren't that long ago, long enough though, there was really not many realtors out here, and Bob happened to be one of them. My wife made some calls, and we wanted to move out here at the end of civilization in Chelsea. So we made an appointment with Bob, and Bob took us around on his own time with no hard sell, showing us the community, the attributes, and the people. And that really struck me. Until this day, I've had great respect for that man. He's the salt of the earth, in my opinion. Later on, when I was finishing up my college degree, And I was in between jobs. Bob offered me a job at Reemco Development, which I stayed there for probably a year or so. And then, guess what? About a week or so ago, I found out that he did that to other people too. And out of the generosity of his heart, he gave people employment. The family has done things here in Chelsea. They belong to, doing things for Faith in Action, the school system, the Boy Scouts, and he's just like the real deal. So I don't need to look at this. Bob will explain that stuff to you. But I'd like to welcome my friend and a great person, Bob Riemenschneider.
Well, thank you, George. It is an honor to be here. And, when George asked me if I would speak, I thought, what in the world would I talk about that anybody would be interested in? That I could possibly have anything that anybody would be interested in. So it forced me to take the time to think about life in Chelsea, and it just brought a whole bunch of memories back. Before I get into that, I better make a disclaimer. First of all, no fact-checking allowed. Secondly, these are my memories. I own them. I made them, and nobody else can use them or change them. First, I'd like to acknowledge the most important person in my life, my high school sweetheart. Wife of 46 years, 2 months, 29 days. Janine. My sister Alice is here, and my daughter Sue and Steve DeWolf, son Rob, and Jennifer, his wife. Arlene Howe was supposed to be here tonight. She's my first cousin, but she had a little accident and she's in the hospital doing okay. But she called and said that she wasn't going to be able to make it. Additionally, where are Janine's sisters? Janine's sisters are here, Bobby Offenbecker and Pat Borders. So I'm going to reminisce a little bit about a time gone by. Some of you will know exactly what I'm talking about. All the others, I hope, will obtain some meaning and understanding and appreciation of the wonder of Chelsea. My dad was Lawrence Earl Riemenschneider, known as L.E. to many, or Remy. And my mom was Marie Hoffman Riemenschneider. I had a brother, Carl. He was 5 years older than me. He died in 1986 with complications from diabetes. My mom called me the bomb baby, as I was born at essentially the same time they were dropping bombs over Japan. And so that was in the wee hours of August 7th of 1945. And of course I mentioned Alice, and without getting into any dates and letting the cat out of the bag, she's much, much younger than I am. Oh, heck, about 2 years younger. Well, there have been at least 6 generations of Riemenschneiders and Kambaws on my dad's side, and 5 generations of Hoffmans and Isleys on my mom's side that have resided or are residing in Chelsea. And you can surmise from all the names, it's not the Luftwaffe, but it's definitely German. As were a great number of the settlers in this area. Wars, feuds, conscription of young men into military service, overcrowding and expensive land were pervasive throughout much of Europe in the 1800s. And the search for a better life and the freedom to choose one's own destiny were really the propelling forces for my ancestors and others to make the difficult and momentous decision to kind of pull up roots, leave their extended families, history, and homelands. My great-grandfather, Riemenschneider, emigrated to America from Germany in the late 1850s. He settled in western Sylvan Township and took up farming. The Hoffmans came from the Alsace-Lorraine region, moved through New York State, through the Thumb area, and ended up here. The Isleys was on my grandmother. Hoffman was an Isley. They were also from the Alsace-Lorraine region, and they were known as exceptional stonemasons, and they were recruited to come here and do a lot of the stonework in the area. So a lot of what you see throughout Chelsea are the work of the Isleys. A couple personal lineage notes. I guess before I get to that, a couple sidebars. My grandfather and his brother had farms on the pretty much all along the west side of Kavanaugh Lake, down to I-94 and up to pretty much McClure Road, or where the Waterloo Recreation Area headquarters have been, and on the east side of Crooked Lake. And Janine's grandmother's family, the Walshes, they owned at one time all the property from that point north up to Cassidy Lake and around the trout ponds and so on and so forth. So had things been a little different, we'd be land barons, but we're not. My grandmother was a Combaugh, and her brother was John Combaugh. He was a local attorney. And he employed a young lawyer at that time by the name of John Keish. And many of you know John. He knows more about the history here than just about anybody, I think. So you know what they say about small towns, be careful what you say about someone, because everyone seems to be related to each other. And John Keish is, of course, related to my wife, as his mother and Janine's grandmother were sisters. Now, John Combaugh, John Keish's mentor, had a son, Leland Pete Combaugh, that a lot of people knew. He was well known because he became chairman of the board of Massachusetts Mutual Life Insurance Company, was a golfing buddy of Ike Eisenhower's, and was a member of the Augusta National Golf Club, which is pretty prestigious. Pete enjoyed his roots here, and he maintained a home for many decades on East Street. Hilda McClure, whom some of you may have remembered, was a cousin of mine. She was a Riemenschneider, and she and her husband owned the Chelsea Standard for many years before the Leonards took it over. So her father and my grandfather were brothers. And about more than 20 years ago, I started spending some time with Hilda trying to get information about her family. Most of my family was gone, and it's too late in life when I started thinking about it to think it was important. And so I tried to spend as much time as I could with Hilda, and we were getting ready to take a trip to Europe and wanted to find out where we came from and so on and so forth. So at any rate, she told me a story that Arlene Howe later confirmed, because Arlene and Hilda were cousins, and when the decision was made by my great-grandfather to leave Germany, a small town in Germany called Obermollert in the state of Hessen, just north of Frankfurt. There was some great concern about how dangerous the trip could be should they make it. Well, there have been reports of really terrible conditions on the ships and the unseaworthiness of many of the boats, and people being lost at sea. So they were determined to make the passage, but they were going to wait for a new ship that was being built. And they were going to have to pay a real premium to get on that ship, and so they booked passage on it. And I can't remember the circumstances, but they missed the ship. It sailed without them. And so they were there, and their only choice was a ship that was their worst fears. Should we or shouldn't we? And they decided we can't go back. We're gonna go for it. And so it was a pretty tough voyage. They made it, and with great relief. And at a later time, they found out that that new ship that was being built got into a bad storm, and it did go down. And so for a little twist of fate, I wouldn't be here tonight. Now, my great-grandfather Hoffman came from a family of 13 children. My grandfather Hoffman came from a family of 14 children. And he had 8 children and lived here in Chelsea. And his one son, Maury, had 12 children. They were all obviously very good Catholics. The early Riemenschneiders and Kambaus, as far as I know, were not nearly as prolific and could only manage about half that many kids. So I haven't figured out if this was because it was something the Catholics knew or didn't know, or if it was the Protestants that knew something or didn't know. I'm not sure what it is. So when I started thinking about life in Chelsea as I knew it, every night as my head would hit the pillow, a mental movie started playing. And boy, I couldn't sleep. The memories that just came pouring out. It was like a waterfall. I couldn't stop it. So I'd like to share a little bit of that movie about growing up in post-World War II Chelsea. My mental movie tended to ramble a little bit, so I hope this doesn't ramble too much. I tried to get it in order, and I don't know if I succeeded, but so picture Norman Rockwell paintings. Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet, The Andy Griffith Show, Dennis the Menace, The Christmas Story, traditional families, simple, slower time for Sunday visits to relatives, church, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, stay-at-home mom. Take and mix that all up, and it's a pretty good representation of my life at 175 Park Street. 175 Park Street was a pretty special place. And location. So, for those of you who don't know where that may be, let me place it for you. Well, Park Street, of course, starts at the corner of Main, and where Schneider's grocery store is, Chelsea Bank is, the post office, and the butcher shop. Everybody knows where that is, right? Now you go down Park Street to Morlock's Garage. You know where Morlock's Garage is, yeah. Getting a few puzzled looks. You know Morlock's Garage, a place where there's a glass-topped, hand-operated gas pump at the curb, where the Morlock brothers and a couple of other old guys are sitting around chewing tobacco, spitting, smoking cigars, pipes, just chewing the fat. You know where you go with a flat tire when you've got a flat tire on your bike and They patch it up for you and just tell you to go on. Or if it's your lucky day, you get an ice cold cream soda or root beer. That's where these old guys are reading a newspaper, magazine, laughing hard, whispering and laughing. It's where you could smell a mixture of sweat, an old dog, tobacco, grease, and gasoline. You know, where you'd look up past the open big wooden doors that were open, inclined wooden ramp that goes up kind of half story, and you'd see cars up there on jacks, but I never saw anybody working on them. So you know what I mean? It was just down from the dairy bar. That was next to the blacksmith shop. Let me help you remember. It was diagonal from Staffan's Funeral Home and right across from the church. Now I think they got a sign on there that says a Purple Rose Theater or something. Don't pay any attention to that. You just have to pull back the curtain and see what's really there. So anyways, go 4 houses past Morlock's garage and you're at my house. Nice big front porch, corner lot, big maple trees. Best of all, just across the street is a school. What fantastic luck. Being on the corner, we could see and hear everything that was going on. On the porch, I could look all the way up to the street to the dairy bar, look the other way, the playground, kids walking to school, the school buses parking on East and Park Street to let kids out and pick them up. Man, this was as good as going to the movies. Laughing and hollering, the sounds of swinging, the school bell and the bell tower ringing, crew cuts, DA haircuts, petticoats, saddle shoes, cars laying rubber and dragging, and the sound of those straight pipes or glass packs on those big V8s. Friends and one or more of the Hoffman cousins running up on our porch after school. The Hoffman kids always wanted to see their Aunt Marie, my mom. Laughing, plotting what to do next. Almost always it seemed to be the dairy bar next. Inside my house, from my dad's office, there was a big picture window. We looked head on to the front of the original part of the brick schoolhouse with a tall bell tower and the keyhole-shaped entrance. Mrs. Kelly's kindergarten room on the corner, first grade room across the hall. In the yard on the corner of East and Harrison Street was the Rock, standing up proud, not like it is now at Pierce Park laying on its side. But best of all, there was the gymnasium. The best of everything happened in the gym. Penny carnivals, plays, concerts, noon dances, sock hops, donkey basketball, and then real basketball. It was a classic gym. Walking in the door on the right was a ticket office. Looking through the double doors was a raised stage on the opposite end and wraparound balcony up top. Friday night basketball was great. The gym was always packed, people hanging from the rafters or the balconies. Great teams with the likes of Dave Crocker, Bruce Hoffman, Neil Beeler, Bob White made the crowds go crazy. And I swore the noise was so loud that the roof was going to come off. At the end of the playground is where they parked the buses. In the fall, late afternoons and Friday nights, I could hear the click, click, click of football cleats coming up the rear steps where the locker rooms were. Players with the pads on, making the walk to the football field on Washington Street. It was right across from Dr. Fisher's house on Washington Street. Everybody knows where that is. For special events like Halloween or a big pep rally, they'd have a huge bonfire on the playground. Cheerleaders, the band, and of course cider and donuts. All anyone sees today is a group of apartments. But don't believe it, pull back the curtain, there's much more. When school would let out, it was like a trail of ants leaving the nest to find something sweet, past our house, right up the street to the dairy bar. And there was our dog Smitty barking at every one of them. First it was called Schatz's Dairy Bar, then Oni's, then Fritz's, and finally Neil's. How in the world all those kids got into that little dairy bar as a head scratcher. It was always full. Nickel Cokes, 7-cent ice cream cones, they were my favorites. My cousin Fred Hoffman worked there, and I clearly remember ordering a Coke one day. That's probably about 9 or 10. I asked Freddie for a straw. He looks at me and says, "What are you, a sissy?" I'm sure he doesn't remember that, but I do, and I was glad when he left the dairy bar and set up a shoe shine shop at Cushow's pool hall. It's right next to the barber shop and Merkel's hardware store. Henry Shoemaker's blacksmith shop was the adjoining building and right across from Staffan's funeral home. How I remember the sound of the bellows, the roar of the fire. The smell of the coal burning. The hot forged iron, the sound of Mr. Shoemaker's hammer beating the red hot iron on the anvil, and then the hiss and the smell when he dunked it in a bucket of water. I always waited for Mr. Shoemaker to ask me if I wanted to pump the bellows. That was a big deal. Well, in that mental movie, I kept hearing the sounds of Chelsea at 175 Park Street. The 11:30 siren, time for lunch, every day. The clock tower, every quarter hour, and a dong for every hour. The church bells on Sunday morning, the school bell starting the school day. Train whistles, day and night, an endless parade of trains hauling freight, loaded with cars, coal, wheat, lumber, paper, machinery, passenger trains full with people making stops at the depot. The whistling of Bob Foster, the owner of Foster's Men's Store. He walked down on his way to work, came down East Street. I could hear him coming, walking up Park Street, hear him off into the distance. In the evening, coming the other way, whistling. The sounds of whispers at night, kids laughing and going, "Shh, someone's going to hear us." They were painting the rock. The underlying, ever-present, always in the background sounds of industry. The throbbing and humming heartbeat of a dynamic and thriving post-war economy. Metal being stamped, cut, sheared, drilled, milled, turned on lathes at Rockwell Standard, Central Fiber, Pearson's Machine Shop, Chelsea Products, and Federal Screw Works. The Chelsea Standard printing presses on East Middle Street, and Chelsea Milling. All but Chelsea Milling are gone. Mom playing the piano. She could really play. She played the piano for the silent movies at the Princess Theater when she was a teenager. She had to create the moods for the movies, so she could play almost any style of music you could think of, most of it by ear. She could play sheet music, but she was just a prodigy. "Come on, Mom, play some boogie woogie," we would say. And if she was in the mood, 175 Park Street was jumping. Oh, wait a minute, everybody knows where the Princess Theater was, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's right behind the curtain at Merkel's Furniture Store on Main Street. Silhouettes of the past, the hustle and bustle of a thriving downtown was a dominant part of my earlier years. Chelsea was an independent, self-sustaining community. Everything that you needed or wanted was right here. Just downtown, there were 3 grocery stores, at least 4 meat markets, 3 barber shops, a department store, bank, bakery, 2 appliance stores, 2 auto repair shops, car towing business, 2 drug stores, 1 with a soda fountain, 2 dairy bars, John the Greek's candy store, cigar and newspaper store, 2 jewelry stores, 2 dime stores, 2 to 3 hardware stores, depending upon which we're talking about, a pool hall, 2 restaurants, cleaners, hotel, bowling alley, printing shop, shoe repair shop, 2 men's clothing stores, 3 car dealerships, movie theater, post office, blacksmith shop, sheet metal shop, 3 bars, 2 to 3 card halls, 2 gas stations, library, police station, jail, fire department, all about where the existing police department is right now. Newspaper, doctor's offices on the 2nd floor, dentist on the 2nd floor, lawyers on the 2nd floor. Just outside of town, gas stations, root beer stand, Dairy Queen, roller rink, Weinberg's Dairy and Dairy Bar. Then the construction of I-94 slowly started to change the character of Chelsea and how and where people shopped. There were some unforgettable moments. We had next door neighbors that were immigrants from Germany, Mr. and Mrs. Adolf Duer. Their house was on East Street, but we always went to their back door, which was right out our back door. I was Mrs. Duer's little schnickel Fritz, as she liked to call me. She loved to have me come in and give me something to eat. And the best thing, of course, was the thick German pretzels. I loved being her little schnickel Fritz. Dudley Holmes of the Jiffy Mix Holmeses was my best friend growing up. And his back door was on East Middle Street, mine on Park Street. Well, the easiest way to get to each other's house was through the Duer's backyard. I'm guessing we were about 7 years old, and we were traveling the trail from mine to his. And this is the way I remember it, but he may tell it a little differently. Dud disappeared, and I heard, "Robert," everybody called me Robert. "Robert, in here." I'm looking around now. I found where he crawled under the slightly open garage door of the Duers. They had a brand new Pontiac. They also had cans of pink house paint and paintbrushes lined up against the wall. And only because Dud suggested it. We decided that the new car should be pink. Well, we did it. All of it. The whole car, tires, windows, bumpers. Everything got a fresh new coat of paint. Mrs. Duer heard us at work. She opened up the door and I thought she was going to faint. Adolf had unintelligible ranting in German, and I assumed it was really good cussing. Well, that was the end of my Schnickelfritz days. And that's also when I learned how big my dad's hands really were. A lesson learned. Next to the post office was the new movie theater. Mr. and Mrs. Wolverton owned and operated it and also owned a landscaping business. He was a big man, always dressed in suits except when he was in landscaping mode and he wore khaki shirts and pants and a pith helmet. They always drove Cadillacs. She was a little woman, very thin, always made up, pearls and minks, as I remember. She sold the tickets and ran the concession stand. Standard operating procedure, you looked around at the flat disc lights on the walls, and when they started to dim, you knew action was about to start. Of course, it was the Looney Tunes, Three Stooges maybe, could be Mom, Pa, Kettle, Bowery Boys, current events, news from across the world, and previews of coming attractions, and then the movie. Well, it was 1953 and I was 8 years old. Occasionally I went to the movies by myself in those days. Parents didn't have to be too concerned about where their kids were and what they were doing. Well, I just finished watching Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. Aliens invading the world. It was terrifying. The worst part was right after the movie, I had to walk home by myself. I remember it was really dark. There was a street light at Main Park, and looking down the street, and the only light was way down at the end of the block. Everything between was dark. The blacksmith shop, the funeral home, the alley. But I was in luck. I had just got my new PF flyers from Glick's department store. I stood at Schneider's grocery store, tightened my laces up, took a deep breath, and sprinted all the way to my front porch, slammed the door shut. I made it. The aliens didn't get me. I'm sure my feet never touched the ground. It was those PF flyers. I'm going to talk a little bit about my dad. He's a pretty unusual guy. Before I do that, I realized I was getting a little long here, and I have to absolve myself and talk a little bit about my mom. Pretty sweet, loving, hardworking, always there for us. The glue and rock of our family. Extremely talented musically, and just a lot of fun. About my dad. I remember my dad pacing the floor, endlessly, continuously thinking, often dictating a business letter to my mom on the typewriter. You see, my dad was always self-employed. He was an inventor, manufacturer, self-educated chemist, engineer, mechanic, a real entrepreneur in the truest sense of the word. He taught and instilled in us, through his actions, a strong moral compass, curiosity, the desire for lifelong learning, deductive reasoning, critical thinking, independence, perseverance, strong work ethic, always aim high. Mediocrity is not good enough. My dad was born in 1901, grew up on the family farm on Mushbaugh Road. His mother decided that he had to do something better than farming, as their farm wasn't terribly productive. A few miles from there, they got double the wheat that they would get on their farm. My grandma had sent Dad's sister, Alma, that's Arlene Hell's mother, to college to get her teaching degree, and she did get that. Then she decided that, my dad was younger, that he should go to college and study to be a bookkeeper. Well, that was the furthest thing from his mind. He went to high school at 11, Western Michigan at the age of 15. In his ever-active mind developed interest in the fields of science and medicine. So at the first opportunity, he left college and pursued other means of endeavor. So while working administratively at Ford and later as the assistant sales manager for Chrysler of Canada, he also pursued his true interest. Dad developed some health problems about that time, and they were pretty severe. After tests and analysis of his problems, being of the mind to never accept the easy answer, he didn't buy into the diagnosis of his doctors and started doing his own research. This just furthered his curiosity and thirst for being able to answer so many answered, or in his opinion, incorrectly answered questions. Through his early years, he honed his skills for deductive reasoning and critical thinking. At the age of 26, he started his own business. At that time, there was widespread malnutrition in the country, even in the more well-to-do homes. Based upon his research, he determined that by adding vitamin supplements to milk, he could help cure this problem. The problem with the cure was that it tasted really bad. So he deduced that if he added chocolate, egg, and malt, he'd have a product that would be palatable. It worked. This was sold in half-pint bottles and by the case. This was a great success. He became known locally as the inventor of chocolate malted milk. Well, that wasn't exactly correct, and that wasn't his intent. But this venture furthered his interest in foods, and it led him down a path of trying to determine why did food spoil. Reading and studying bacteriology and enzymology on his own, it led him to the conclusion, and this is before there was such a thing as refrigeration, that the colder that you could keep a food at a constant temperature close to zero, that virtually all bacteria activity stops. So in the 40s, he designed and developed the first freezers that could keep foods at constant low temperatures. He started a manufacturing business that sold large chest freezers with roll tops and walk-in freezers throughout the Midwest. As a result of this, he became an expert at refrigeration. He was subsequently recruited by Lincoln Mercury to consult with them on designing air conditioning for automobiles. This later led to consulting with over-the-road long-distance haulers of refrigerated products. They had refrigeration compressors that were run by gasoline engines mounted on trailers, but they couldn't keep the engines running. He determined that the use of two-cycle engines to run these compressors was probably the most desirable because of their lightweight, durability, and they didn't have a crankcase. The problem with a two-cycle was that the spark plugs would follow up after short periods of time. Well, my dad's obvious conclusion was to find a way to stop the two cycles from following up. So he went to work utilizing his self-gleaned knowledge of organic chemistry to design a fuel that was gasoline mixed with a blended synthetic oil that after mixed would never separate, would burn completely and leave no carbon buildup, no smoking, and no fouling of spark plugs. He went on to patent this product and ran a very successful business for many years. Then in the 70s, the oil embargo and gas allocation was a death blow to the business. This all occurred at about the same time that the 17-year patent life ran out. Being around Dad was both exciting and almost terrifying. It was exciting because he was always building or creating something. He was always fabricating, machining, and experimenting. I didn't always know exactly what was going on, but sure was interested until he started asking me questions. This was the terrifying part. After one of us kids would get the lecture about some obscure scientific concept, whoever was the closest to him was trapped. It was always the same, and we knew it was coming. He would ask, "Did you understand what I just explained to you?" This was the bad part. If we said yes, he would say, "Okay, repeat it." If we said no, we'd get the 45-minute lecture all over again. So either way, we lost. A passionate curiosity for the medical and scientific problems of the world served as a common thread throughout his life. He spent most of his non-business hours scouring all of the scientific and medical literature and journals to formulate his theories about the causes of cancer. This document right here is his lifelong work. And he spent a considerable part of his personal fortune to help solve one of the world's deadliest diseases. Until his death in 1970, this was his absolute obsession and passion. Ironically and tragically, Mom died of cancer in 1968 at the age of 56. So except for the early deaths of my parents and premature death of my brother, I can't think of anything I would want to change about my life in Chelsea. What could possibly better than have been born, to have been born and raised as an American in Chelsea, Michigan? Immense community pride, small town, Midwestern moral values derived from strong traditional religious upbringing, a seemingly unspoken oath and obligation to preceding generations to carry on and leave Chelsea better than we received it. To ensure that it continues for the generations that follow. This is the stuff that made this town, my town, your town, a very special place. Thank you.